This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios Podcast Network. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. Thank you to all my supporters on Patreon. If you too would like an ad-free experience of the podcast, become a patron at patreon.com/gracefulatheist. If you're in the middle of doubt, deconstruction, the dark night of the soul, you do not have to go through it alone. Join our private Facebook group, Deconversion Anonymous. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/deconversion. We have merch. If you would like to have a t-shirt that is about secular grace or the Graceful Atheist Podcast, mugs, notebooks, all kinds of things, check it out. Arlene has set up our merchandise shop. The link will be in the show notes. Special thanks to Mike T for editing today's show. On to today's show. Arlene interviews this week's guest, Stephanie Stalvey. Stephanie is an amazing artist. She grapples with motherhood, purity culture, sex, family, her own personal deconstruction process, and her own spirituality. You can find her on Instagram at stephanie.stalvey.artist. Stalvey is spelled Stalvey. There will be links in the show notes. Here is Arlene interviewing Stephanie Stalvey.
Stephanie Stalvey, welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here.
You and I have tried a few times to get together and have this conversation, so I'm super excited. Let's see, I got back on Instagram like October 2021, I think, and I somehow found you, and I have followed you since, and I'm so thankful that you're on the podcast. Your artwork, everything is so great, and you are a guest that I've had a few people say, hey, can you get Stephanie Stalvey on the podcast? Hey, can she be on the podcast? So yes, your artwork is known, so to our audience.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm so excited. That's nice to hear.
The way we usually begin is just tell us about the religious environment of your childhood.
Oh, wow. Okay. The religious environment of my childhood. Yeah, that's why I feel the need to make this entire long-form comic, is to try to explain it, I guess.
Yes.
So I was born in 89, in like the Midwest, right? So I have been like thinking a lot about what it meant to be a Christian in America in the Midwest in the late 80s, and just what that meant psychologically for me and my siblings and everything. So that is kind of like, I don't know, the beginning of where I started making these comics, was to explore that. But my dad was, at the time, he's worked like in some capacity in ministry since I was born. But at that time, he was in like this role as like the president of a international missions organization. So it was like church planting, church leadership, and also international missions. So we would do like some summers in like the Ukraine, church planting, that kind of stuff. And my dad was one of the people who, like, I don't know, in the late 70s was like born again on a college campus type of thing, which I think is really common. And he came from like an abusive household in Detroit, just like a lot of pain and dysfunction in his childhood. So then when he's kind of introduced to this particular like born again, like very proselytizing version of Christianity in college, like I think it offered him a way to, use his gifts and connect with people and have, social structure. And there's a lot of ways in which it was like really good, I guess. My mom, on the other hand, was like raised by my grandfather, who was a Methodist pastor, priest. I don't know what you call the Methodist. But he was also like a chaplain, army chaplain. So, and they were like opposite of abusive childhood. My grandparents on my mom's side were like the best, sweetest Indiana people. But she had like kind of the raised Methodist, which is like kind of a more mild, I think, version than what my dad had. So then by the time that I was born, and me and my sisters are raised like in the 90s, we were just what everybody just calls Christian, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like kind of a homogenization of everything. I have like this brilliant friend, Dr. Michael Thompson, who he wrote an article about this in particular, how like in the 1970s, these figures like Hal Lindsey and Francis Schaeffer, like one of the major things that they did was to create that homogenization of Christianity, where like as before you would have like these separate ways of identifying your Christian identity, but then like after this it was just like, no, there is Christian and there is not Christian, and it kind of like takes away the option that there's any other way to like understand or practice your faith, which I think is really interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
And I definitely think that kind of continued, and that was my experience even in my 20s. I think my version of that was probably like Gospel Coalition, right? Like,
Yes.
I know, God help us, was like, Chandler and Piper and Tim Keller and Driscoll and all these guys,
all
the way
very
that they would talk
familiar
about
names.
it was like, yeah, oh yeah, I'm sorry, trigger warning. But yeah, the way that they would talk about it is just like the gospel, right? There's not any other version. But then I guess I went to a Christian elementary school, and then like when I was like 11, we moved from Ohio to Orlando. My dad, we had some hard years. Like our family had some hard years. And we kind of got cut off from the church that we had been in since I was a kid. Found a new church. So we joined like a new church here when I was maybe 13 or 14. And then my dad got involved there. My mom worked in childcare, and we were very involved in that church. And yeah, it's just a lot of wild experiences there. We had, the pastor of that church, he ended up taking his own life after this kind of, public and terrible, like extramarital affair things. There was just like all this shame that surrounded it. And, it was something that, someone we loved and had to mourn, but it also, I think that was a really big moment of reckoning for me, where I had to sit and say, I think all of this is a lot more complicated than I've ever been allowed to think it is. That was like in my very early 20s. I think that the entire process for me, it's just been gradual. It's been gradual. So when you ask, what was the environment, it's hard because it kind of touches everything. But that's what I'm interested in thinking about recently.
For the most part, was growing up in the church like good memories, hard memories, or just a lot of both?
Yeah, it's hard because it's my only memories.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's another thing that I'm interested in thinking about in the work is, as I've, grown up, and particularly as I've become a mother, it kind of makes clear the parts that were really, I mean, just like drinking poison, but then they're also attached to every good memory that you've ever had, a bunch of really positive things that like enriched you and every person who loved you into existence. So there's nothing about the process of deconstruction, as we call it, that is easy. And I think that's the reason for it, is that it's just not complicated. It's learning to, or it just is complicated, and it's learning to think about things in a, more nuanced way and less black and white. Yeah.
And it's like thinking, you mentioned Matt Chandler, he made the offhand comment in one of his sermons that we're doing this, we've deconstructed because it's trendy, it's cool, it's sexy. And it's like, no, we're pulling apart something that some of us have been taught since we were babies. It's our whole community. It's our family. Just all the things that are most important to us. Like, no one's doing this because it's the cool thing to do. So when did you said it's been a long thing. Like, when did were there questions that you started asking or anything specific that happened to kind of start you going, okay, something's not right?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that about Chandler. I listened to that man speak. Like, it has to be hundreds of hours. I had this, okay, when they had like the old iPods that like, you could like
for all the MP3 players. Yes.
Oh yeah, the Village Church, everything on there.
I had all the John Piper sermons to run to. I was running. I was supposed to be jogging. I was listening to this foolishness. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, please. Like, I understand. The most recent comic that I made actually was like, included some of the quotes from the Explicit Gospel that he wrote, whenever that was, like 2011 or something.
I'm sure I read it. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So like one of the things that he said, and I remember just feeling like scared to have doubts when I heard this part, because he would always just like kind of mock and humiliate in order to like be funny, I guess. But it was something about like you're the kid in the backseat of the car. You're the 4-year-old in the backseat of the car. You're going to scrutinize how God governs. Do you know how small you are? Do you know how insignificant you are? And it's like it's a laughter in the audience after that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make that comment because I'm a mom now. Oof. Sorry.
It's okay.
It just makes me so angry.
Yeah.
That this kind of stuff got told to us because, follow the logic. If we're the 4-year-old in the back of the car, who is humiliating us for having questions? What kind of a parent is so threatened by a child's by anything a child might do? So yeah, becoming a parent was, I think, really it was the end of kind of fundamentalism for me in my mindset, but it had been years before that I'd been kind of thinking about things. I want to say that when my pastor took his own life, which was maybe 11 or 12 years ago now, that's when I first started to ask myself, okay, we have this kind of like script within the church for how to explain when something like this happens. Whenever there's a scandal or something, it comes out that another pastor has done something or has a secret life or is struggling with addiction or is having an affair or whatever it might be, we say like, oh, well, this was an individual sin issue, right? This was separate from the system. It's not indicative of anything dysfunctional in the way that we're running church. This is this one particular guy. And it just didn't work for me. Like I knew it wasn't true. I knew that you couldn't just like explain away, well, he wasn't a real Christian or something like that. And I just said, if this is supposed to be the antidote to shame, why are people dying of shame? Why? And, it seems to me that there were just a bunch of people who were genuinely trying their best, operating within a system that wasn't working. And so, yeah, I started to let myself ask these questions. I think that there were, years that I had to let myself be angry, and I think I was angry about the way that a lot of my family's best intentions to be good and do what was right were steered in the direction of something so that like ended up hurting us all. So like, when my parents were young and they wanted to be the best kind of parents they could, like every other Christian parents in the 80s, they'd go buy the books by the Christian people who are what James Dobson, Focus on the Family. And they instruct my mother, who would never have hit us, to spank us and to do these like punitive things because that's what God needs you to do, So once I became a mom, which my son is about to turn 4, it was just, it's such a transformative experience in so many ways, but the definition of love could not be anything less for me after that. There was no way. And, I was learning and reading a lot about secure attachment in, the developmental early years, and kind of the way that kids, especially when they're very young, we need the opportunity to be real, to be difficult, to be angry, to be demanding, and to still know that we have safety and security and love from our parent, that our parent is not going to leave. And the way that insecure attachment kind of forms when a child learns that they have to suppress their own difficult emotions in order to avoid being screamed at, hit, abandoned, humiliated. And, I just kind of mapped that onto, well, this is kind of the paradigm. This is the framework that has been applied to God, I think. And you can't really have both. You can't say that God is a good parent whose unconditional love and mercy is going to heal the wounds of humanity with the same punitive, authoritarian paradigm that inflicted those wounds in the first place. Yeah.
Like 100% everything you just said. Like my husband, he realized he couldn't believe anymore before I did. And his thing was, after he had become a dad, like he was like, I shouldn't feel like I'm being a better parent to my children because like the way we were taught, because again, we were Calvinists, John Piper, Mark Driscoll, all the things, was like, God has predestined some people to go to hell forever, and we have to be okay with that. God has like well, my husband's big thing was God could do harm to our whole family, and we would have to be okay with that because God is always doing what's best. And it's like, this is not loving. Like, no matter how many different ways we tried to make it work, that's not loving. And I, for a long time, was trying to make it make sense. I was like, okay, maybe Calvinism's not right. Let me find another version. And it was just like, we couldn't look at the way the world was and the way Christianity said God was and make it make sense.
My heart just like hurts hearing it.
Yeah, it was very emotional for my husband. Like, it was really hard for him. Mine was different. Like, my realizing I couldn't believe was different. So becoming a mom, like, how, may I ask, if you don't mind, how did that transform you beyond just physically? Like, you talk about becoming a mom, the like, I see in your artwork, and we're going to totally get to your artwork, but like, I see in your artwork just the divinity of a woman's body and like the ability to have, just so much. So yeah, how did all of that change you particularly?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, it was for me a truly, I mean, a sacred experience, a holy experience. It continues to be. But it's the most incredible thing for your body to create a human being and for then your body to sustain and nourish that human being. So it's like, by my milk, my blood, my tears, this soul, this human being has come to life. And it just felt, I was hearing kind of like the words of the sacrament, my body broken for you. But then I was thinking about it on all these different levels, on like a kind of like a cosmic level. When he was young, I read through, some cool 1970s, like, feminist literature, like, The Great Cosmic Mother and stuff about like, prehistoric matrifocal societies and, God as a woman, as womb. And it felt, it felt like the kind of transcendence that doesn't bring you out and away from your body, but deeper into it. And I think for me, what that was too, I became a mother kind of at the very end, or I think I became pregnant at the very end of a long season of pain and mourning and, even just like kind of a nihilistic perspective towards life. I didn't know, the way out. And I think that in a way, like, that becoming a mom it broke me back open in this like really spiritual way, I think. And I felt this full permission to just like be as earnest and honest as possible. We brought him back to church when he was little, because we're sitting there, and it was like the middle of the night, and I'm breastfeeding Tommy, and I'm talking with my husband, and I'm like, should we bring him to church? He's like, I'm surprised that you want to. And I'm like, well, I don't want to deny him anything. And again, you have that kind of push and pull where there's all of these things that I think are profoundly just like good for humans, like community and ritual and meaning. And, I don't know, the faces, the traditions, all of this stuff is just, it's human. It's in us, and we do need it. And I think that for the past, like, however many years it was before he was born, I was just so aware of the way that those needs, or those that hunger for the divine, that hunger for tradition, made me vulnerable to manipulation and heartbreak and fanaticism and radical thinking, that it makes that hunger, that human hunger, makes us susceptible to that kind of stuff. But the hunger is still there. And I still, need to eat as a human.
Yes.
So it was a painful experience, because we brought him back, and it's a bunch of loving people, and I'm, they're cuddling your baby and they're watching him, and I'm sitting in the auditorium, and the person is talking about how our sin makes us unworthy of the love of God, and there's no big or small sin. And even my little kid, this was the quote, even my little kid, taking a book that isn't hers and writing her name in it, even that sin is enough to keep her out of heaven.
Yeah.
And we got back into the parking lot, got into the car, and I just cried, and I said, I can't. I can't have him growing up thinking I'm bad. I can't have him grow up thinking I deserve to be put to death. Yeah, I won't. He isn't. It's not true. I won't let him hear it. And then I started letting myself access the points of pain in my own childhood where I was a little girl who heard that. And, I remember being in second grade in chapel and hearing the same thing about, Jesus died the death you deserve to die, and meditating on the crucifixion as something that ought to happen to me for my, whatever it was in second grade, my willfulness, my disobedience, my tongue, and going back into the classroom and just pinching my arm as hard as I could and saying, this is nothing compared to what you did. Take this pain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I've had to just go back to that little girl and just continually show her a lot of love. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have to reparent ourselves, parent our own little selves. I didn't grow up in the church, but I grew up in a home where I was just kind of the third wheel. My dad really, if they were going to have kids, he wanted to have a boy. He didn't really want, so it was just I was just kind of extra. And so it's I have to go back to little Arlene sometimes and just be sweet with her the way I would. I saw a meme. My kids say, Mom, you're always seeing memes. I saw a meme. But it was just talking about how we become the parent we needed when we were kids.
Oh, yes.
And yes, you for your baby now, or he's not a baby anymore, your 4-year-old now, you're able to be the mom that sweet boy needs, in a way that it's crazy being a parent. It's hard. It's difficult.
Yeah.
There's so up and down, but
yeah.
The love you have for him and your ability to know from inside your body what this is not good. I can't let my baby grow up believing these things, because you know what that harm is like.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's been complex for me too, because I resisted for long, because I'm, my mom was an incredible mom. And so I'm well, I don't need that. I don't need that. But I think everybody does, because everybody's parents are human beings. And when I'm with my 4-year-old and you get triggered by the tantrums of your 4-year-old, I'll feel little Stephanie, I'll feel 4-year-old Stephanie try to say, I got this. I'll handle this. I'm going to go toe to toe with this kid. And I have to step in and say, actually, I'm a grown up. I'm capable of self-regulation. So let me take over. I have conversations I can reckon. I'm like, oop, there she is. There's 4-year-old.
Yeah. Emotional regulation, like,
it's hard.
Oh my goodness. I'm like, this is what we need as parents. All the other stuff you can figure out. But if you can just stay calm when that sweet little prefrontal cortex that is not fully developed goes just offline, we've got to stay online. We've got to stay. Yes. So may I ask, where are you now? I get all the beautiful, like, divine feminine vibes from your artwork, but I am just totally like projecting. So tell me, where are you now as far as spirituality, or are you anywhere?
Oh yeah. No, thanks. So, if we're going back to like that car in the parking lot, where I was like, I can't do this. I think too, I was talking to my husband. If anybody reads Pure, they know how perfect my husband is. He's, but I was just like, I don't know what I think anymore. I don't know what I believe. I don't know what I am. I don't know how to identify. I don't have a label, and I don't know if I should bring him to church or not, and I'm scared. And he just said, you don't have to know. You just don't have to know right now. It's okay. We can just be. And it was just so important for me to hear that. To just give myself permission to just be, and to be able to actually ask questions that don't have a predetermined answer, that I don't have to get to. I don't have to make myself think something or another in the end. And I needed to let God expand into whatever God might be. And so, yeah, I'm just a very naturally really curious person, and I spent a lot of time reading and exploring, and through things like therapy, actually, kind of what we're talking about is similar to like parts work, right? I don't know if you're familiar.
A lot of my work. George. Are you familiar with Boundless and Free on Instagram?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Tawny George has been on the podcast, so she acquainted me with parts work and things like that.
So it's like Richard Schwartz, internal family systems, and it's this idea that we have these different parts of ourselves with different motivations. And so that kind of became a theme in my work too. I have, try to illustrate the part of me that's just like wild and rebellious versus the part of me that is more like a good girl, like a loyalist. Mm-hmm. But part of my healing has been about recognizing the value of each part, stop being demonizing and being at war with different parts of myself, and getting in touch with what I think is the self, like the true self. So I think that this is like a spiritual belief of mine that we are in our hearts, in the inmost essence of the human heart is good, is pure and sacred and not depraved. And I believe that it is in the presence of compassionate witness that the parts of us that are the most destructive and the most nasty have the opportunity to heal and transform. And so for a long time, the parts of me that I thought were just sinful, and I needed to cut them out, and I needed to go to war with them. When I was able to approach them and say, I don't want to kill you. I don't hate you. Even if you are doing something that is not helpful, that is not right, whatever it might be, I don't hate you. That was something that allowed me to soften, to witness the pain that they were carrying, to see who they were protecting, which usually whatever behavior they were engaging in at one point kept me alive. And so I could see this is how I stood up and defended you when you were 2. And I could just honor these parts of me. And I think that we honor them from the self, which is the part of us that I think is divine. I think that it's like the DNA of God. I do. And, it's interesting. I'm now at this point, I'm not going to a church. I'm very much like letting myself do label-less kind of like just communion with God as I feel. It's but it's interesting because I think that the fundamentalist framework that's just so got its hands around religion that it seems like it's the same thing as religion. Mm-hmm. It kept me from being able to actually see like the parts of Christianity that from the time I was young were the most dear to me, which is kind of the same thing, like the image of God as Jesus touching the flesh of a person that everyone else has decided is disgusting and mm-hmm. disposable, and just not telling them to do anything different, but saying, I am willing to touch you and witness your pain and empathize with you, and I'm not interested in dehumanizing you or telling you that you're bad or wrong or to change or something, and that being the place by which we heal. And so I think that by kind of letting myself shed all of this bullshit about biblical literalism and like, just like the patriarchal hatred of poetry and archetype and parables, frankly, which,
Oh, good point. Yeah.
It, and I'm an artist, so that's kind of like my thing. Like things are not, they don't have to be literal to be true also, so I think that once I kind of shed those things, I could finally see and like actually be in more true alignment with the principles of Jesus that I value. And mm-hmm. I went back and I'm like, okay, well, in kind of the evangelical world or in the fundamentalist world, Jesus is reduced to the role he plays in the salvation equation. He's the one who dies,
Yeah,
his life and his teachings are like very irrelevant to them. He's just like, Jesus dies to absorb the wrath so that you don't have to, that's all he is. And it, so then you miss anything that he said. And that's, I think, the way that so much of Western Christianity was able to end up like becoming the thing that put Jesus to death. But yeah, I think that we find God in the mystery of so many other things. I think that it's a word that just means such different things to different people. Like, I think it was like Alan Watts who said, he was kind of like in the 60s would interpret like Eastern religious ideas for kind of like a more Western audience. But he's like, when a Christian is talking about Lord Adonai, he's talking about the boss. He's talking about the one at the top of the political power structure to whom obedience is due. Whereas like if a Hindu is talking about God, they're talking about the inmost essence of all life that dances the universe into existence. Whereas, you know, like I was speaking before, like ancient humans, I think actually were able to get in touch with archetypal kind of representation of God as a woman, as a womb. And yeah, I think I'm doing what I said before, like where I'm trying to step lightly and like be cautious, because I am aware of how the hunger for God does make us more susceptible to manipulation, like cult-like behavior. And it's not just in Christianity. It's absolutely not.
No, not at all.
Oh yeah. It's like in all kinds of spaces. And I've even been like since in like these kind of more like new age bullshit things. And I just want to be aware of it. But I'm also, I also am a human being and need sanctuary and connection and meaning. And for me right now, like when I am meditating on the way in which I'm connected to every other person and the way in which every other person is important and valuable and sacred in this way that doesn't change and worthy of love. And when I am participating in this eternal mystery of love, that's when I feel close to God, I would say.
I guess I identify as a humanist or an atheist, but everything you say, like we have this need for community, for connecting to the natural world, to other people. There are rituals that are meaningful to people, like that. Sasha Sagan's book, Small Creatures Such as We, she's like, just because we're humans and maybe gods and goddesses, they don't exist, but rituals, we need rituals. We've always had them, but they've always been helpful to us. And yeah, there's just so much that, like you were saying, the church has kind of cornered the market on community and ritual and tradition and all these things. Whereas really we need to figure out, like, how can we find those things without having to also sell our souls and values to morals that are just immoral, like things, beliefs that are harmful, you know, all that. And I love that you've been able to figure out like what works for you.
Well, I mean, I don't think I've figured it out. I think that I'm very much in process. This isn't like oh, before and now everything's okay. I think these kind of conversations, even like between the two of us who like have experienced so much of the same things and the same hurt and can connect in that way and talk and wonder and share and witness each other. I think that's part of it for me. I think that's been part of what has been helpful. And like I was saying about fundamentalism not being, you know, necessarily like the content of your beliefs, but almost like a style of thinking. Yeah, I try to be aware of that too as I'm like exiting fundamentalist thinking, that I don't replace it with like, well, here's the new thing that I cannot question, and here's the new people that are bad, and here is the new, you know, just doctrine and way to preach. I don't think that the point is about being intellectually right, and that's what happened with fundamentalist Christianity, is that, like, they say you're saved by faith, but it's faith in the right thing, right? It's faith in the right set of ideas. And yeah, I think that I think there's more to it. I think that people heal when they have permission to be fully honest and know that they are not bad. I think that intimacy cannot be coerced or forced, or else it becomes oppressive. And unconditional love isn't an ultimatum. So if I want those things, if I want to, move towards intimacy with myself, with the divine, with the people in my life, I have to switch to something more liberated, and moving, and fluid. Something, more akin to a dance or an unfolding. It's different season to season, and it's okay. It's okay.
I need to be reminded of that because, I can very much see myself becoming convinced something else is right. Like even after I went through what one of our former guests calls rage learning, it was like, here's everything I was not allowed to be taught. I'm going to learn it all. And my husband, he was like, you're starting to sound like a fundamentalist atheist. And I was like, oh, that's a really, like I had to sit with that for a little bit and realize because fundamentalism comes in a lot of different forms, but it's like, this is the correct thing. And I can't learn or hear from anything else. And I was like, I don't want to be like that. I want to be able to read, I don't know, there was Dance of the Dissident Daughters. Like that was part of my deconversion, reading that book. And I was like, hold up. Like I've never thought about God in this way. And this was when I was still a Christian. So I was like, I was on my way out, but I didn't know I was on my way out. I don't think.
Right.
But it's like, I would need to be able to hear from Sue Monk Kidd in her story. And I still need to be able to read, I don't know, Bertrand Russell. I'm just coming up with names, and be able to hear from people who have come to different conclusions, or like you said, are just willing to let things stay fluid so that I don't become nope, now I'm correct in a different way. That's still just, it's prideful. It's unhelpful and unhealthy. Yeah.
Well, I think that's in your title of your podcast too, is Graceful Atheist. Is that, just like fundamentalism doesn't just belong to religion, grace and kindness and empathy and compassion doesn't just belong to God. I think it's your belief in God or whatever. I think that it matters how we treat one another. And I don't want to dismiss pursuit of what is true and good, because I think that's 100% important, and I don't want to discount that. So doing the rage learning and stuff, that I think it's important. It's an important part of the process. And it's good to keep pursuing learning stuff. I mean, that's what being a human is. But I think that the core principles that I've arrived at are ones that hold space for people at all different points in their life, and for the different parts of myself as they come up. The one that's that wants to dig her roots down more into something traditional, and the one who wants to tear things down or pull them all apart. They're all valuable, each one of them, and I can listen to and care for each one of them, like we said, like inner children. Doesn't mean that I have to do whatever they're telling me, but I'm not scared of them anymore.
I love that. tell us about your artwork. For anyone who is not already familiar with your comic or your other artwork, like tell us all about it.
Okay, yeah.
And we
Well,
will link to everything in the show notes. So we will send everyone your way.
yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I've been an artist forever, and, lifelong, art kid. And I went to art college and got an art degree that I took out too much money for and just inhaled a bunch of, paint fumes. Uh, wild times. But yeah, I've always loved comics. I've always been making comics in one form or another. I really love how intimate they are, how kind of like accessible and personal and almost like camp. I love that they're like low art, that they're not like gallery art. I love everything about comics. But yeah, when my baby was little, I started painting a lot more with like wash and watercolor because oil paint was like, you can't have that around a baby and you probably shouldn't have it around yourself, but it's like toxic. So, so I started painting more like small. And at that time, yeah, I was too like, the great cosmic mother, the womb of the world. I am, we are born of the earth. This, and all the stuff that's still true. The mother, Mother Earth is our mutual home. We are children of the universe. Getting back in touch with nature. There's so much we could talk for years and years. Animals, all these kind of stuff going through my brain, and I have to process it through my art, through painting about it. That's how I do it. It's how I synthesize my kind of reality. It's also how I meditate on what I think is beautiful and true. There's just a high to it. Like, I mean, artists know. But then I started making comics too. I think I started making church kids in like 2020. So I had this image in my head. The first one I made was that black and white comic where we're the church kids and we're raised without radiance. Everything is black or white. And what it means to grow up with these ideas of things being so absolute. What does that mean now that we've woken up and the whole world is shades of gray? And so I was like, well, this is visual and I need to visit this. And then I just started writing and I was like, I just need to write everything that being a church kid was. And at this point, like, I had no idea that there was like an online deconstruction community. I just started posting my comics and, it was just wild. They kind of took off. And so most recently, I've been posting like a serial comic about my experience with purity culture.
I love it. I love it so much. It's so great.
What do you like about it? I don't know what to talk about it.
Well, for me, my husband and I didn't grow up in the church. We became Christians in college. So we got like bits and pieces of course we read, not I Kissed Dating Goodbye because we were already in college. We read Boy Meets Girl, I guess was the other one that he wrote.
Oh, yeah. I know that
And
one.
that was like the courtship book and like all that kind of stuff. So we got that kind of stuff where like I wasn't supposed to initiate. He was blah, 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 all that mess. Well, anyway, and I was like, I had already had a bad reputation. People were like, are you sure that God has? And he's like, yes, I'm sure. And now we've been married 18 years and like being married. So anyway, I think, oh girl, it was fun. But the comic, like I love, like how do I say this? So I don't love memoirs, but I love comic book version memoirs. So I've read like Raina Telgemir's stuff and I've read some of Shannon Hale's stuff. And she grew up a Mormon. Well, she's still Mormon, but she grew up Mormon. And so it's like just knowing that you and your hubby are still married and seeing like how gracious he was and how patient he was and the way, like it breaks my heart also though, watching like your little inner monologue of like, what am I doing? Should I be doing that? And it's just like, this poor girl was having to go through so much more than just like figuring out how to date, because that's just hard enough as it is. And so it's just, and it's beautifully done. The artwork is beautifully done. And like you said, I imagine it's taken off because so many people have had such similar experiences, high school and college, and
everybody. And it's torment. But yeah, I find that like when I can just sort of forget how many people are reading it and just say, oh, like, let me tell like the truth, stuff that happened. And, you know, if it's something that I think is like funny looking back, like I think it's worth like laughing at some of this stuff because it's kind of absurd. So I wanted to make something that like was a little bit sexy. I'm getting to some parts that I think might be just for Patreon. but I wanted to make something that's like a little bit sexy, a little bit funny, but also really earnest and just like actually, or I could just actually say like what happened. And when I do that, it's crazy. People are like, this is also what happened to me. And then we can find each other, and the comments end up being so cool. And I get connected to so many other people that either like went through it or they're still kind of like processing awful traumatic things that are still affecting their life and their marriage and their relationships. And I think that the comic is cool too, because it's a way that I can make something that I'm really uninterested in like preaching anything, you know. I don't want to be some kind of like supposed expert on anything. I just want to tell my story. You know? So yeah, it's fun, and I'm kind of I'm working on that being like pure, being basically part of what will hopefully be like a longer form memoir that'll kind of I'm a school teacher, and it's just about to be summer, so for me that's gonna mean just like back to the drawing board, literally. Like I'm just gonna be drawing all summer. But yeah, it's really cool. There was a good 10-week stretch where I posted 10 pages a day, and or not a day, jeez.
I thought, wow, I missed that. Oh my goodness.
No, that would be completely impossible. But you know, let myself not be a machine and take my time when I need to. But I want to get back to like a more consistent schedule, because it's fun too, just as an artist, to like make something and then immediately be able to share it. Like I feel like I'm back in high school, like drawing in the margins and like passing it to somebody and be like, check this out, I just made this.
I love it. So we have a few more minutes. Do you have any recommendations, books, podcasts, other artists, other people telling their stories, any recommendations for our listeners that have things that have helped you?
Oh my gosh.
Or that you just love and want to share with others?
Something that I just love? If you like my comics, you probably already like Blankets by Craig Thompson. It's the most brilliant thing I've ever read.
I'm not familiar with this, so this is great.
Oh, he does. Okay, so it's like, I think he wrote it in 2003, but it's a graphic memoir, and it's similar. It's about his first love, but then he also kind of weaves in his childhood and kind of his relationship with his brother. I think it's Wisconsin he grew up, but it's also fundamentalist Christianity, and it's his process of coming of age, and it's just achingly beautiful. And I think that if anybody like knows Craig Thompson, they probably can see like what an influence he was, and even if like the way I draw. But if you haven't already, like, go get that Blankets. It's a really incredible book.
That's awesome.
It's really beautiful.
Well, Stephanie, Thank you so much. Like, this has been such a lovely experience. I'm so glad I got to see you face to face on here, and then our audience gets to hear your story. This was so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Oh, I think you're just so lovely and wonderful. And I want to, take you
Give an
out
air hug.
for coffee and keep talking and give you a hug. Yeah.
Yes, I would love that. I am always here for coffee.
Yes, no, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. It's been really nice to have the chance to say it out loud in order. I'm not used to saying it out loud.
Yes, it's almost therapeutic to just get it all out at one time. Yeah.
Arlene, you just gave me a free therapy session.
Yes, nice. All right, Stephanie, have a fabulous weekend.
Thank you.
My final thoughts on the episode. Oh, this was such a lovely conversation. Stephanie telling her story. You can see the love, like you can hear the love she has for her family, for her husband, for her baby, for her own self. Like, it's just absolutely beautiful. And the processing that she goes through when she's trying to understand, like, things that happened in her past, things that are happening today, relationships, all that, like, it comes out so beautifully in her artwork. Oh, it's all so moving. The way she portrays motherhood is just absolute perfection. It's incredibly moving for me as a mama. I loved this conversation. It reminded me of something Jimmy wrote on the blog. I think he was talking about different worldviews and life philosophies and all these different ways we can see the world. And it's beautiful when we can take from all different kinds of truths that we have found throughout the world, not necessarily from nonfiction things, but like just truth that we have seen or experienced or read about in the world, pull that together to create a life or a philosophy of life that is good for ourselves, and it's good for the world around us and for the people. And like, that's what secular grace is. That's what humanism is just doing, feeling, thinking as many different ways as possible what is good. I don't know, even the word good feels like not enough, and it can also be very trite. But yeah, I love what Stephanie's putting out into the world. I loved hearing your story. This was a lovely, lovely interview. I loved it.
The Secular Grace Thought of the Week is about connection. Whenever I'm on someone else's podcast, I talk about the ABCs of secular spirituality. That is awe, belonging, and connection. The connection part is what we heard in this conversation with Arlene and Stephanie. Two people deeply connecting about important things and learning from each other and literally feeling that bond between them. My personal view is that our longing for the divine, for the transcendent, for God, what have you, is really a longing for a connection with other people. We've said before a number of times, the human condition is the need to be known and the need to be loved. And it is when we connect with one another, that we are known by another human being, that we feel the most fulfilled and spiritually satisfied, for lack of a better term. Next week, we have returning guest Daniel. Daniel is an active member of the Deconversion Anonymous Facebook group. He is also a social scientist with a background in psychology, in addiction, and various other fields. He and I are talking about the psychology of apologetics. You are not going to want to miss this one. That is up next week. Until then, my name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. The beat is called Waves by Mackay Beats. If you want to get in touch with me to be a guest on the show, email me at gracefulatheist@gmail.com. For blog posts, quotes, recommendations, and full episode transcripts, head over to gracefulatheist.com. This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios Podcast Network.